Through the chained door, my mother said, "You do not belong here anymore." My name is June Hartley, 33, a nurse. I had come home from a 12-hour shift the night before Christmas to find my whole life boxed on the porch. The locks changed. I had spent 3 years under that roof nursing my father after his stroke, and it was my own mother who decided I no longer belonged. What she did not know, somewhere inside sat a paper with my name on it, the one she needed gone. 9 black garbage bags stacked in 3 careful rows. The kind you use for yard waste, thick plastic that doesn't tear. My scrubs, my books, my framed nursing license. 3 years of living at 412 Plateau Road, reduced to knots and handles. The new brass deadbolt gleamed under the porch light I'd replaced last spring. I stood there in my Cumberland Medical Center badge and coffee-stained fleece, keys dangling from fingers that had just spent the night keeping strangers alive. My brain processed the scene with the same clinical detachment I used for trauma assessments. 9 bags, new lock, porch swept clean, no note. The door opened 4 inches. A chain I'd never seen before pulled taut. My mother, Colleen Prescott, 58 years old and immaculate, even at 7 in the morning, looked at me through the gap. Her face held no anger, no sadness, nothing I could argue against, just administrative finality. "You do not belong here anymore." I heard my own voice, surprisingly steady. "Mom, it's 3 days before Christmas. Can we please talk about this?" There is nothing to discuss. Behind her, I could see my father in his recliner. Otis Prescott, 65, his left side still weak from the stroke he'd had in November. He sat facing the television, but I knew he could hear me. I'd been his daughter for 33 years. I'd moved back home to help with his recovery, rearranging my life because family was supposed to mean something. "Dad?" I didn't turn. The door clicked shut. I stood there breathing steam into the December air, waiting for the shock to hit. It didn't. Instead, my ICU training kicked in. Assess, prioritize, act. Hysterics wouldn't change the deadbolt. Begging wouldn't answer the question of why. So I opened the first bag. Clothes folded, not thrown. Someone had taken time with this. My winter coat, my favorite cardigan, my work shoes, paired and wrapped in a grocery bag to keep them separate. This wasn't rage packing. This was methodical. I checked the second bag. Photo albums, yearbooks, the jewelry box my grandmother left me. Things my mother could have kept or thrown away, but instead she'd made sure they came with me. How does a family lock out their daughter 3 days before Christmas without a single word of explanation? The question sat there like a patient I couldn't save, unanswerable and accusatory. I moved through the remaining bags with the same systematic attention I used for pre-op checklists. Bag 3. Bathroom items, still damp towel from yesterday's shower. Bag 4. Books, desk supplies, my laptop. Bags 5 through 7. Shoes, seasonal clothes, the electric blanket I'd bought last winter. Nothing missing, everything accounted for. That bothered me more than the eviction itself. If this was impulse, cruelty, punishment, fine. I could process those. But this level of completeness suggested planning, weeks of watching, cataloging, waiting for the right moment to execute. My phone buzzed. A text from Sharon, my coworker. "You awake? Need you to cover tomorrow night?" I typed back, "Can't. Family emergency." The understatement of the year. Bag 8 held my nursing textbooks and the quilted throw I kept on my bed. I pulled it out, noticed something slide between the folds. An envelope, thick cream paper, the kind used for legal documents. My name written across the front in my father's handwriting. The shaky cursive he'd developed after the stroke had stolen coordination from his dominant hand. No, not recent. This handwriting was steadier, older. I flipped it over, a notary seal, embossed and official. The date stamp read March 2018, 5 years ago. My hands went still. I'd spent a decade as an ICU nurse, coaching dying patients' families through impossible conversations, holding space for grief and shock and the terrible math of loss. I could survive this. I would survive this. But this envelope changed something. March 2018 was before I'd moved back home, before Dad's stroke, before whatever invisible line I'd apparently crossed. This wasn't a recent decision. This was old, planned, waiting. I turned it over again, checking for tampering. The seal was intact. The envelope had been opened, carefully, with a letter opener, not torn, but the flap was tucked back into place. Someone had read this. Someone had decided I needed to find it now. The front door was still closed. The curtains didn't move. But I felt watched, assessed, like a chess piece being moved into position by a player who'd been planning this game for half a decade. "What were you trying to tell me?" I whispered to the envelope. The paper felt expensive under my fingers, the kind that doesn't yellow fast. But it had yellowed, just slightly. The cream turned to ivory at the edges. Time and storage and someone's deliberate choice to pack it with my belongings instead of burning it. You know the moment when one small detail shifts everything you thought you understood. When the story you've been living suddenly reveals itself as chapter 3 of something that started long before you were paying attention. I was holding that moment. The envelope bore a notary seal from 5 years ago, and my father's trembling handwriting spelling out my full name. Whatever was inside, my mother had just made sure I would find it. But whether that was a mistake or part of a longer game, I couldn't yet tell. And I had nowhere to open it, except the front seat of my car in a town that would be talking by morning. I loaded the last garbage bag into my trunk and drove to the only place in Crossville that took walk-ins without questions. The Budget Inn on Highway 127 sat between a closed-down gas station and a Dollar General. I sat in the parking lot, phone pressed to my ear for the 4th unanswered call. "Hey girl, at the in-laws through New Year. Call you when I'm back." I tried Sharon next. Voicemail. Then 2 other coworkers. Everyone was away, wrapped up in holiday plans I'd skipped to help with my father's recovery. I opened my banking app, ate the $500. My emergency fund, built over 3 years of extra shifts and packed lunches. It had felt substantial when it was theoretical. Now I did the math. Motel at roughly $70 a night. Food, gas, no paychecks until after Christmas. If I was careful, I had maybe 6 weeks. 10 years as a nurse had taught me what prepared really meant. Enough money to be homeless slowly instead of all at once. The motel office smelled like stale coffee and pine cleaner. The night clerk, a tired man in his 50s named Mr. Howell, barely looked up from his crossword puzzle. $67 a night plus tax. How many nights you staying? Just one, for now. He handed me a key on a green plastic tag. Room 14, checkouts 11. The room was exactly what $67 bought. Worn floral bedspread, bolted television, bathroom grout gone gray. It smelled like industrial cleaner masking decades of transient lives. I dropped my bags and sat on the bed with the envelope. My hands shook as I opened it. Not from fear exactly, from knowing that whatever was inside had been important enough for my father to notarize 5 years ago, and dangerous enough for my mother to hide ever since. The document was thick, official, dense with legal language. But the core facts emerged. Property deed, transfer of undivided 40% interest in real property at 412 Plateau Road, Crossville, Tennessee, from Otis James Prescott to Leora June Prescott, filed March 14, 2018, notarized, recorded with the county clerk. I owned 40% of my parents' house, had owned it for 5 years without knowing. March 2018. I scrolled through old calendar entries, searching for context. There, February 23rd, 2018, Dad's heart attack. The one that nearly killed him, left him in ICU for a week. Mom had driven to Memphis to stay with her sister. Said she couldn't handle hospitals. Ryder had been traveling for work. I'd been the only one who stayed, the only one there when he woke up confused and asking for water. 3 weeks after discharge, he'd filed this deed. "You protected me," I whispered, even then. How long had my mother known this deed existed, and what had she been planning all these years? I photographed every page, then started Googling. Tennessee property law, tenancy in common, rights of co-owners, legal language that swam together after 12 hours in the ICU and 6 hours of having my life dismantled. The basics emerged. If I owned 40%, I had legal rights. My mother couldn't just lock me out. This wasn't her decision alone. Unless she didn't know I had the deed. Unless she thought she'd buried this secret and I'd leave quietly, homeless and ignorant. My phone buzzed at 11:47 p.m. Unknown number. The text read, "Ms. Prescott, this is Forrest Kendrick, attorney. I prepared your father's property transfer in 2018. We need to discuss it. Urgent." I sat up fast. My fingers shook typing the reply. "How did you get my number? How do you know what happened today?" The response came immediately. "I've been expecting this call for 5 years. Can you meet tomorrow morning? 9 a.m., Bluebird Cafe downtown." Why now? Why today? Because your father asked me to watch. And because what's happening isn't legal, but it will be permanent if you don't act fast. I stared at the screen, my brain in triage mode, assessing threat levels. How do I know you're who you say you are? You don't. But you're holding a deed that proves your father trusted someone 5 years ago to document his intentions. That someone was me. I'm offering to finish what he started. I looked at the notary seal, at the signature. Forrest Kendrick, attorney at law. 9 a.m., Bluebird Cafe. Bring the deed. Don't tell anyone you have it. The conversation ended. I sat in the chemical-scented darkness of room 14, trying to make sense of a day that started with trash bags and ended with a stranger who knew my father's secrets. Forrest Kendrick, 68 years old, and carrying what felt like decades of professional guilt, had reached out to me the night I lost my home. An attorney I'd never met had contacted me within 12 hours of being locked out. Either he'd been watching my family for 5 years, or someone had told him today was the day everything would break. A stranger knew my father's secrets and my mother's timeline, which meant someone had been waiting for this day. The question was whether he was there to help me or finish what my mother started. I had until 9 a.m. to decide whether to trust a stranger with the only leverage I had left. I walked into the Bluebird Cafe at 9 o'clock on December 23rd, sleep-deprived and carrying the only proof I had that my life wasn't what I'd believed it to be. Forrest Kendrick was already waiting in the corner booth, a man in his late 60s with the patient stillness of someone who'd spent years preparing for a single conversation. He stood when he saw me, extending a weathered hand that trembled slightly at the edges. "Ms. Prescott, thank you for trusting me enough to come." I didn't sit immediately. "You said my father asked you to watch. What does that mean?" He gestured to the booth. "It means I've been the worst kind of lawyer, the kind who follows instructions instead of conscience. Please, sit. I owe you an explanation that's 5 years overdue." The cafe smelled like coffee and bacon grease. Christmas music played too loud from speakers mounted near the ceiling. I slid into the booth across from him, the property deed folded in my coat pocket like a loaded weapon I didn't yet know how to fire. "I should have contacted you years ago. Kendrick said, but your father made me promise to wait until you needed this more than you needed their approval. You knew she'd lock me out. You knew and you just watched. I knew your father understood his wife better than anyone. He predicted this day 5 years ago. The words sat between us like an accusation. A stranger had spent 5 years protecting me from the shadows while my own family orchestrated my exile. I've been monitoring your family's finances, Kendrick continued quietly. Courthouse records are public, property liens, loan applications, tax assessments. Your mother's been drowning in debt since 2020. I knew when her situation became desperate enough, she'd need to liquidate assets, and I knew she'd see you as an obstacle. I pulled out the deed copy, unfolded it on the table. Explain this to me, not the legal language, the truth. He nodded, reaching for a worn leather briefcase. Let's go to my office. There are documents I can't show you in a public cafe. His office was 3 blocks away, above a vintage clothing shop on Main Street. The stairs creaked. The hallway smelled like old carpet and lemon furniture polish. Inside, the space was small but organized. Filing cabinets lined one wall, a desk buried under carefully stacked folders, a window overlooking the empty Saturday morning street. Kendrick pulled a thick file from a locked drawer. He came to me March 10th, 2018, he said, opening it, 2 weeks after his heart attack. Said if anything happened to him, you shouldn't be left with nothing. I stared at the documents he spread across the desk. Official forms, notary seals, my father's shaky signature, next to my name, written in careful block letters. Transfer of undivided 40% interest in real property located at 412 Plateau Road, I read aloud, to Leora June Prescott. Filed March 14th, 2018, Kendrick said. Recorded at the Cumberland County Clerk's Office. Public record. Your mother simply never looked. How do you thank a father who saved you from his own wife before you even knew you needed saving? The house is worth approximately $285,000, Kendrick continued. Your 40% interest represents $114,000. She cannot sell it without your signature on a quitclaim deed. I sat down hard in the chair across from his desk. She can't sell without me. Not legally. Then why lock me out? Why now? Because she recently discovered the transfer exists. I suspect she finally checked the property records when she started researching sale options. The lockout is desperation. She's trying to pressure you into signing away your interest before you understand what you have. My brain shifted into the analytical mode I used for critical patients. What do? We file a formal ownership claim at the county clerk's office. It's already recorded, but filing an active claim prevents her from contesting the transfer's validity. We do it Monday morning. Make your ownership undeniable. I looked at the deed, at my father's signature next to mine. 2 names bound together in legal language that meant he'd seen this coming half a decade before it happened. There's something else, Kendrick said quietly. He pulled a second folder from the file, this one sealed with tape, my name written across it in my father's trembling handwriting. He wanted you to read this only after you understood the deed. I touched the envelope. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind that doesn't yellow quickly, but it had yellowed slightly, 5 years of waiting in a locked drawer. What is it? A letter, explaining not just what he did, but why. I haven't read it. He sealed it in my presence and made me swear I'd give it to you only after you knew about the property transfer. My hands shook as I held it. Inside was my father's voice, captured before the stroke stole his words, explaining why he'd known his wife would choose money over their daughter. He knew, I whispered. 5 years ago, he already knew. He knew her, Kendrick corrected gently. And he knew you deserved better than what she'd leave you with. I had a legal weapon in the form of property ownership, but my mother had a 5-year head start on desperation. Kendrick slid the folder across the desk. For Lyora, only after she knows, read the label in my father's handwriting. Inside was a sealed letter explaining why a man with limited mobility and failing speech had chosen legal documents as his only way to scream the truth. I broke the seal on my father's letter with hands steadier than my heart, knowing whatever he'd written 5 years ago would hurt more than the lockout ever could. The paper inside was thin, the kind used for carbon copies in legal offices. His handwriting was stronger than I'd seen in recent years. This was before the stroke, when his fingers still obeyed his intentions. Lyora, it began, if you're reading this, something went wrong the way I knew it would. I read it standing at Kendrick's desk, unable to sit, unable to look away. They told me I might not make it through the night. February 23rd, 2018. My heart gave out in the kitchen, and the ambulance took 40 minutes to get there because of the ice storm. You drove 3 hours from your apartment in Nashville to sit in that ICU waiting room. Your mother called from her sister's house, said she'd come if I was really dying, but it sounded like just a scare and she'd already paid for the hotel. I stopped reading, looked up at Kendrick. She was in Nashville? Visiting her sister, had been for a week. She didn't come, not until the cardiologist said he was stable. Love measured inconvenience, calculated from a hotel room in Nashville, while her husband counted his heartbeats alone. I kept reading. That's when I understood. My father's letter continued. Love that comes with conditions isn't protection, it's debt. And I knew if my body failed me entirely, if I couldn't speak anymore, couldn't stand between you and her, you'd need something stronger than my voice. If I couldn't protect you with words anymore, I'd do it with paper and county stamps. My throat closed. I folded the letter and set it carefully on Kendrick's desk before I could damage it with shaking hands. He came to me March 10th, 2018, Kendrick said quietly. Still wearing his hospital identification bracelet, sat in that chair and said if he lived, he'd live, knowing you were protected. She never checked the records. People don't review recorded deeds until they need to sell. Your mother was probably having a title search done for a potential buyer when she discovered what your father did. I picked up the property transfer document again, looking at the filing date. March 14th, 2018, less than 3 weeks after the heart attack that showed him exactly who his wife was. The house is worth $285,000, I said. 40% is $114,000, Kendrick finished. Your legal share, she cannot sell without your signature on a quitclaim deed. How many years can a secret hide in plain sight in a public courthouse filing cabinet? But she knows now, I said. That's why she locked me out. She's trying to force me to sign it away. Or she's trying to contest it. Kendrick pulled another file from his drawer. Tennessee property law is complicated. The recorded deed is valid, but adverse claims can challenge old transfers under certain circumstances, such as undue influence, mental incapacity at the time of transfer, fraud. Your mother could argue your father wasn't of sound mind when he signed over 40% of the marital property. I thought of my father in his recliner yesterday morning, silent as my mother locked me out. He had the heart attack 5 years ago. He's still alive. How can she claim he wasn't competent? She'll argue the heart attack and medications impaired his judgment, that you manipulated him during a vulnerable time. Kendrick's expression was grim. It won't work. We have medical records proving he was lucid, but she can file it anyway and tie this up in court for months. How long do I have? We should file your formal ownership affirmation within 45 days of you discovering the transfer. Mid-February deadline. That establishes your active claim and makes it harder for her to contest. 45 days, I repeated. but there's something you should know." Kendrick leaned back in his chair. "I heard through courthouse connections that your mother's already been to Harold Dunn's office. He's a property attorney 2 towns over. She was asking about invalidating old property transfers." The words landed like ice in my chest. "When?" "Last week, before she locked you out. The race wasn't about to start. I had just discovered I was already 3 moves behind." "So the lockout wasn't impulse," I said. "She's been planning this. She discovered the deed, consulted an attorney about challenging it, and then forced you out to weaken your position. She's hoping you'll panic and sign a quitclaim just to get back inside." Kendrick's office phone rang, cutting through the deadline discussion. He glanced at the caller ID and frowned. "County clerk's office," he said, answering. "Kendrick speaking." I watched his face change as he listened. "When?" A pause. "Just now? This afternoon?" Another pause. "Thank you for letting me know." He hung up slowly. "Someone just requested copies of all property transfer records for 412 Plateau Road," he said. "Filed February through March 2018. The request came in 20 minutes ago. My mother, or her attorney, they know you've discovered the deed, and they're building a counter case." Kendrick stood. The careful 45-day timeline I described, it just collapsed into a sprint. Whoever files first at the courthouse sets the legal narrative the other has to fight. I spent Christmas Eve reading Tennessee property law on my phone until my eyes burned, and woke Christmas morning to the smell of institutional coffee and someone else's cigarette smoke drifting through the motel ventilation. Through the window of room 14, I watched families load presents into cars, children running across the parking lot in new coats, parents carrying casserole dishes wrapped in aluminum foil. My phone sat on the nightstand, silent as a held breath. No calls, no texts, no Merry Christmas from the people who'd raised me. Last Christmas, I'd been making Dad's coffee at 6 in the morning, helping him into his chair, watching him struggle with wrapping paper while Mom directed the morning like a stage production. This year, I was watching strangers celebrate what I'd lost. Except I hadn't lost it. I'd been locked out of it. There was a difference. I made instant coffee with the motel room pot and spread my notes across the bed. County offices were closed until Thursday, which meant 3 days before the legal race could resume. 3 days to understand exactly what weapons I had and how to use them. The property deed gave me 40% ownership. My father's letter proved his intention was clear and documented. Kendrick's timeline established the transfer happened when Dad was medically sound, weeks after the heart attack, when he'd proven his recovery. What I didn't have was a family. What I did have was the freedom not to pretend I did. Freedom, it turned out, looked exactly like loneliness until you stopped mistaking absence for loss. I was halfway through my second cup of terrible coffee when my phone rang at 2 in the afternoon. Mom's number on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "Sweetheart, it's Christmas." Her voice was warm, concerned, the one she used with neighbors and church friends. "This is silly. Come home. We'll have dinner and talk about everything like adults." I set down my coffee carefully. "Talk about what exactly, Mom? About the locks you changed or the bags you packed? About family, about your father's care, about making this situation right for everyone." The warmth held, but I could hear the script underneath. She'd prepared for this call. I overreacted. We both said things, but it's Christmas, and you're my daughter, and this has gone on long enough. How many times can you hear the word sweetheart from the woman who locked you out before it stops sounding like anything but a strategy? "What about the house?" I asked. "We can discuss all of that. Financial arrangements, your living situation, everything. But not like this, not with you in a motel on Christmas. Come home. We'll figure it out together." I let the silence stretch, counting my heartbeats, testing. Before I come over, I said carefully, we should discuss the property ownership situation, the 2018 deed transfer that Dad arranged. The silence that followed lasted 8 seconds, I counted. When she spoke again, the warmth was gone, like a light switch flipped. What exactly has that lawyer been telling you? He's been explaining what Dad did, and why. Forrest Kendrick is a bitter old man who should have retired years ago. Her voice had frost in it now, the temperature dropping with each word. Whatever he told you, whatever papers he showed you, they don't mean what you think they mean. They mean I own 40% of the house. You have no idea what you're doing. The control was slipping. I could hear it cracking at the edges. That deed won't hold up in court. I'll make certain of it. Your father wasn't in his right mind when he signed it, and any judge will. She stopped herself, but it was too late. The script had been abandoned. This was pure reaction. Will what, Mom? Any judge will what? You think you're so smart because you found some old paperwork. Her voice was barely controlled fury now. You don't understand what you're doing to this family, to your father. You're tearing us apart over money you have no legal right to. Dad gave me that right 5 years ago, in writing, notarized and filed. I was sick. He didn't know. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew you well enough to protect me from it. The line went dead. No goodbye, no threat, just a click and then silence. The silence after the click was louder than any threat she could have screamed into the line. I sat on the motel bed holding my phone, watching my hands stay steady. The panic I'd expected didn't come. Instead, there was clarity. My mother had just revealed her strategy by abandoning it. She'd tried manipulation, gotten rage instead, and now I knew she was operating from desperation rather than strength. 5 minutes later, a text arrived from Ryder. You need to drop this, now. You don't understand what you're doing to Dad. My brother, the one who'd been silent since the lockout, suddenly speaking up meant one thing. Mom was rallying family allies for the next phase of battle. I stared at the text. Ryder, 29 years old and working as a property appraiser, would understand deed transfers and ownership law better than most. The question was whether he was texting because he believed our mother's version of events, or because he'd been ordered to bring his sister back in line before the courthouse reopened and the legal race resumed. Either way, if the whole family knew about the deed by now, my next move couldn't be defensive. It had to be a strike. I texted Ryder back. We need to talk in person. Tomorrow evening, 6:30, Kroger parking lot. He replied with a single word, fine. Ryder Prescott was already waiting when I pulled into the lot, the evening after Christmas, my brother's figure backlit by fluorescent store lights, looking smaller than I remembered, and far less certain. 29 years old and working as a property appraiser for the county, he stood with his hands jammed in his jacket pockets, breath steaming in the December cold. I got out of my car and walked toward him. We hadn't seen each other face to face since the lockout, though we'd lived in the same house for 3 years. Leora, please. He started talking before I reached him. This stress could literally kill Dad. Just let it go. Let Mom handle the house sale. Hi to you too, Ryder. He flinched. I'm serious. His heart can't take this kind of conflict. What exactly have you been doing to help her? I asked. Be specific. He looked away, toward the store entrance, where a family was loading groceries into a minivan. I'm a property appraiser. I have access to county records. Mom asked me to research her options. That's all. That's all? You used professional access to help her build a case against me? Against a property transfer that shouldn't have happened, he corrected. Dad wasn't thinking clearly after the heart attack. You know that. The brother I'd taught to ride a bike 20 years ago was now teaching our mother how to legally steal a house. "What did you find at the clerk's office?" I asked. His jaw tightened. I was looking for procedural errors, missing signatures, improper notarization, anything that would make the transfer contestable. And the paperwork is solid, unfortunately. The word came out bitter. Whoever helped Dad file it knew what they were doing. Forrest Kendrick, his name is on the notarization. That old man should have retired years ago. Ryder kicked at a loose piece of asphalt. He took advantage of Dad when he was vulnerable. Did you ask Dad why he transferred ownership to me? Or did you just assume he was too confused to know what he was doing? He'd just survived a heart attack. Ryder's voice rose. He wasn't in his right mind. That's grounds for contesting the deed. Any lawyer will tell you that. How does a family divide itself so cleanly along battle lines when the ground beneath them finally shifts? I was lucid enough to file legal documents, I said. Lucid enough to predict exactly what would happen. Lucid enough to protect me from it. Protect you? From what? From Mom trying to keep our family home? From Mom trying to control everything the way she always has. You know what she's like, Ryder. You've lived with her your whole life. She's trying to take care of Dad. He was shouting now, and a couple loading groceries looked over. He lowered his voice. The house has equity. Dad needs long-term care eventually. Mom's planning for that. By locking me out 3 days before Christmas? He went quiet. I'm not dropping this, I said. Not for you, not for Mom. Tell her that. You're going to regret this. He turned toward his truck. When the lawyers get involved, when it gets ugly, you're going to wish you'd just walked away. It's already ugly. She made it ugly when she changed the locks. He drove off without another word, leaving me standing in the parking lot, watching his taillights disappear into traffic. Back at the motel, I sat on the bed with the original envelope from the porch, the one that had contained my father's letter. I'd been so focused on the letter and the deed copy inside that I hadn't fully examined the envelope itself. I tipped it upside down and shook it. Another document slid out. It was a second copy of the property deed, but this one was different. Crisper paper, darker ink, and across the top in my father's handwriting, your copy, keep safe, February 22nd, 2018. Dad. I stared at it. February 22, 2018. The day before his heart attack. No, I checked the date again. February 22nd was the day before February 23rd, when he'd collapsed. This note was written the day before the heart attack, which meant he'd already planned the transfer before his body betrayed him. But that couldn't be right. Kendrick said Dad came to him after the heart attack, after seeing which family members showed up at the hospital. I looked closer. The note said February 22, 2018, but the deed itself was dated and filed March 14, 2018. So Dad had written this note on my personal copy later, after the fact, but dated it to match when he'd first started planning. Or maybe I was reading the date wrong. The handwriting was shaky. Either way, I'd had this document in my possession for 5 years. It had been mixed with my nursing license, my lease agreements, my tax documents. Traveling with me, stored in folders, moving from apartment to apartment. I've had the proof in my hands for 5 years and never knew it. I whispered. 5 years, this document had traveled with my belongings. A loaded gun I never knew I was carrying. I turned it over to check the back. There, in dense handwriting, was a paragraph of text I hadn't seen on Kendrick's office version. Legal language, initialed by both my father and the notary. Some kind of addendum or additional clause. I pulled out my phone and took photos of both sides under the lamp's harsh light, then examined the handwritten section more carefully. The words were technical, full of phrases like irrevocable lifetime interest and undivided tenancy not subject to partition. Whatever it said, My father had made sure this particular copy carried extra insurance beyond the standard transfer language. I woke early to photograph the deed addendum for Kendrick, but the morning light through the motel window caught the envelope at an angle I hadn't examined before, revealing the outline of something small and folded, still tucked inside the flap. I tilted the envelope toward the light. There, pressed flat against the interior, was a slip of paper I'd missed entirely. "There's more," I whispered. "How did I miss this?" I used a butter knife from the motel coffee station to carefully pry it free. The paper was thin, official, the kind hospitals use for patient notes. As I unfolded it, I recognized the header, Cumberland Medical Center, and below that, in my father's shaky handwriting, February 20th, 2018. 2 days after the transfer, I said to the empty room. "You wrote this 2 days after." My hands trembled as I spread the note on the bed. The script was worse than usual, the letters struggling across the page like footsteps in snow. This was the handwriting of a man whose body had betrayed him, whose heart had stopped and restarted and left him weaker than before. But the words were clear. "Lyora," it began, "if you're reading this, something went the way I thought it might. I hope I'm wrong, but I learned something in that hospital that I need you to understand. A dying man's insurance policy written in shaky ink on hospital notepaper, predicting the exact betrayal that would arrive 5 years later. That night in the hospital, you were the only one who came," the note continued. "Your mother called from Nashville, said she'd come back if I was really dying. But this looked like just a scare, and she'd already paid for the hotel. That's when I knew." I had to stop reading, put the paper down, breathe. He'd known. 5 years ago, lying in a hospital bed, counting his heartbeats, he'd understood exactly what his wife's love was made of. "Love that shows up isn't the same as love that calculates," the note read. "You showed up, Leora. You always have. You've been showing up since you were 16 and driving me to doctor appointments. Your mother said she was too busy to handle. You showed up when I had the heart attack this year. You moved back home to help with my recovery when everyone else had their own lives to live." I pressed my palm against my eyes, trying to hold back tears that came anyway. "This house is half yours now, not for what you did for me, but because you're my daughter, and I need you protected from the math your mother does with hearts. She looks at people and sees transactions. She looks at love and calculates return on investment. I looked at that hospital ceiling and realized if I died that night, she'd have full control of everything I'd built, and you'd get whatever she decided you deserved. How do you mourn someone still alive but silent, who said everything that mattered 5 years before you knew you'd need to hear it?" "I went to the lawyer as soon as I was strong enough to drive," the note explained. "Told him I needed to transfer ownership before my body quit entirely. Not all of it. Your mother earned her share by being married to me for 30 years, even if she didn't always show up the way you did. But half of what's mine should be yours, guaranteed, not dependent on her generosity or her version of what's fair." My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I ignored it. "I added extra protection on your copy, the addendum on the back. The lawyer knows what it means. It's a clause that makes the transfer permanent and uncontestable. I wanted to make sure that even if someone tried to claim I wasn't thinking clearly, the legal language would protect you." I picked up the deed and looked at the handwritten section on the back again. Dense legal phrases I didn't fully understand, but now knowing they were my father's deliberate shield. "If you're reading this, I was right about your mother," the note concluded. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you any other way. I'm sorry my voice isn't strong enough to stand between you and her anymore. But this paper has more power than I ever will again. Don't let her take it from you. Don't let her convince you that protecting yourself is betraying me. I'm giving you this because I love you, not because you earned it or deserve it or did anything to obligate me. You're my daughter. That's reason enough. It was signed simply, Dad. No date on the signature line. Just that one word. I sat on the motel bed, holding a note written 5 years ago by a man who'd predicted his wife would eventually choose money over their daughter, and I cried until the paper got damp and I had to set it aside before I damaged it. If you've ever been loved enough that someone protected you from their own family, you know that kind of gift weighs more than any house. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. Kendrick had responded to the photo I'd sent before finding the note. Can you meet now? What you're describing sounds like an irrevocable transfer clause. If executed properly, it means the ownership cannot be contested under any circumstances. I need to see the original. I texted back immediately. On my way. I found something else you need to see. A note explaining everything. His response came within seconds. Bring everything. If what I think this is, your mother's case just collapsed before she filed it. I spread the documents across Kendrick's desk 30 minutes later, the notarized deed with its handwritten addendum, my father's hospital note, and 5 years of utility bills proving continuous residency at the address. This is everything, I said. The addendum you asked about is on the back. Kendrick put on reading glasses and examined the deed under his desk lamp, turning it over to study the handwritten clause. His finger traced the dense legal language while I sat across from him, trying not to fidget. His office was small, but organized. Framed law degree from Vanderbilt, dated 1982, family photos on the credenza, a stack of Tennessee property law reference books leaning against the wall like old friends. The morning light through the window caught dust motes floating in the air. Your father was thorough, Kendrick said finally. This irrevocable transfer clause is your strongest protection. What does it actually mean? It means the ownership transfer cannot be revoked, contested, or undone, except under extremely narrow circumstances. Combined with your continuous residency, he tapped the utility bills. This creates a presumption of legitimate transfer under Tennessee law. Relief flooded through me. So my mother can't claim he wasn't thinking clearly. She can claim it, but she'd have to prove your father was mentally incompetent at the time of transfer. The problem for her is that the transfer happened in March 2018, and his stroke didn't occur until November 2023. Medical records from 2018 will show he was of sound mind. I did the math in my head. Emergency fund currently at $8,500. Filing fee $350. That left me with $8,150 to survive on until I could pick up shifts after the holidays. How much to file the ownership claim? I asked. $350 at the county clerk. I'd recommend we do it within 48 hours before your mother files anything that could complicate matters. I pulled out my wallet. I can pay that. Good. Kendrick made notes on a legal pad. I'll prepare an affidavit of ownership and the foundation for a quiet title action. If she contests, we're ready to respond immediately. I left his office an hour later with copies of everything and instructions to meet him at the county clerk on Friday morning. The courthouse would be open again after the holiday closure, and we'd file before my mother even knew I had legal representation. But first, I had a 12-hour shift at Cumberland Medical Center. The ICU smelled like antiseptic and hand sanitizer, familiar and grounding after days of motel rooms and legal documents. I changed into my scrubs in the staff locker room, tied my hair back, and checked my assignment. Room 7, post-surgical patient, car accident victim, male in his 40s on ventilator support. I spent the first 2 hours of my shift monitoring vitals, adjusting medication drips, and coordinating with respiratory therapy. The work required complete focus, lives depending on my ability to notice when numbers shifted, when breathing patterns changed, when something wasn't quite right. This was what I was good at, what I'd trained for, what nobody could take away from me. At 9 o'clock, I took my break in the staff room with a packed sandwich and an apple. Sharon, one of the day shift nurses finishing her charting, looked up when I came in. "You okay?" she asked. "You've been quiet lately." "Just family stuff. I'm fine." She nodded, but didn't push. In the ICU, everyone understood that sometimes you needed to compartmentalize, to leave your personal chaos outside the unit, because patients needed you functional. At 11:30, my patient's oxygen saturation started dropping. The monitor alarm went from soft beep to urgent warning. I was at his bedside in seconds, checking the ventilator settings, examining the breathing tube placement, watching his chest rise and fall with mechanical precision. "Respiratory to ICU 7, I called into the phone. "Possible tube displacement." The next 10 minutes were pure training and instinct. Adjusting the ventilator, preparing for potential re-intubation, monitoring vital signs while the respiratory therapist arrived and we worked together to stabilize him. By midnight, the patient was stable again. I documented everything in his chart with hands that stayed steady, despite the adrenaline still coursing through my system. "Nice catch," my supervisor said, reading over my notes. Quick response. I nodded, already moving to check my other patients. This was what my mother had never acknowledged, that I'd built a career, earned a degree, developed skills that saved lives. To her, I was still just the daughter who should be grateful for a roof over her head. Except that roof was legally mine now. 40% of it anyway. At 4 a.m, during the quiet lull when most patients slept, and the ICU hummed with the steady rhythm of ventilators and monitors, I sat at the nurse's station reviewing Kendrick's paperwork one more time. My feet ached in my nursing shoes. My eyes felt dry from the fluorescent lighting. The adrenaline from the earlier emergency had faded into bone-deep exhaustion. But I'd done my job, kept my patients alive, maintained my professional competence even while my personal life was combusting. "I've earned everything I have," I whispered to myself. "She won't take this from me." My shift ended at 7 a.m. I changed back into street clothes, grabbed my bag from my locker, and walked out to the parking lot as the December sun was rising. That's when I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from a number I hadn't seen in 8 months. Tindra, my cousin. The voicemail preview made my stomach drop. "Lyora, it's Tindra. I know what Mom's been doing with Dad's disability checks. We need to talk. Call me back. This is important." I called Tindra back from the hospital parking lot, hands shaking as the phone rang 3 times. "Leora," my cousin's voice was tight with stress. "Thank God. I wasn't sure you'd call back. Your voicemail said you know something about Dad's disability checks. Can we meet? I don't want to do this over the phone. I just worked a 12-hour shift. I'm exhausted. Just tell me." Silence on the other end. Then, Mom took out a home equity loan for $52,000 in May 2022. I saw the bank statements when I was helping Dad with his finances. I gripped the steering wheel. She told me they were fine financially. She said Dad's disability covered everything. She's been using his checks to pay the loan. She's 3 months behind now. The bank sent a foreclosure notice, March 2024, if she doesn't catch up. Tindra Gallagher, 27, and working as an administrative assistant across town, had always been the family member who showed up when needed. She'd driven Dad to physical therapy appointments when Mom claimed to be too busy. She'd sat with him after the stroke when the rest of us were working. "How much total debt are we talking about?" I asked. $78,000 combined, the loan plus medical bills from Dad's heart attack that insurance didn't cover, She's drowning, Leora. That's why she wants you out. She needs to sell the house. I processed that her mother committed fraud against her own husband, taking a loan against property he partly owned, forging his signature on documents while he still had the capacity to know what she was doing. How do you know she forged his signature? Because I asked him about it when I found the papers. He had no idea what I was talking about. The loan was filed 3 months after his heart attack, when he was still recovering. She told the bank he couldn't come in person due to medical reasons. That's fraud. That's why I'm calling you. Because she's desperate, and desperate people do destructive things. Whatever's happening between you two, you need to know what you're dealing with. I thanked her and hung up, sitting in my car, watching the sunrise over the hospital parking structure while my brain rearranged everything I thought I understood about my mother's motivations. She wasn't evil. She was drowning. And she decided her daughter was the anchor she needed to cut loose to survive. 2 days later, I met Kendrick at the Wilson County Clerk's office in Lebanon. The building was old brick with marble floors worn smooth by decades of people filing the paperwork of their lives: births, deaths, marriages, divorces, property transfers. Once we file, your mother will be officially notified within 5 business days, Kendrick said as we climbed the steps. Good, I said. Let her know. The clerk's office smelled like old paper and floor wax. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in institutional pallor. Ellen Briggs, the county clerk in her late 50s, sat behind a counter that had processed 30 years' worth of Lebanon's official business with bureaucratic efficiency. She barely looked up when we approached. Property filing, Kendrick said, sliding the paperwork across the counter. Ellen examined the documents with practiced speed. Affidavit of ownership claim, 40% interest in residential property. Filing fee is $350. This will be public record immediately. I handed her my debit card, watching my emergency fund drop from $81.50 to $7,800 in a single transaction. Once recorded, all listed owners will receive notification, Ellen continued, stamping each page with a heavy thud that echoed in the quiet office. Processing takes 3 to 5 business days. Kendrick collected the stamped copies. Thank you. I stood there, watching Ellen Briggs file my claim in the official record books, making my ownership real in a way it hadn't been when it was just a secret document in my father's handwriting. No going back now, I thought. This makes it real. We walked back to the parking lot, Kendrick carrying the official copies in a manila folder. Your mother will receive notification by January 5th at the latest, he said. Probably sooner. What happens next depends on how she responds. She'll fight it. Probably, but we're prepared. He handed me my copy of the filed claim. Keep this somewhere safe, not the motel room. I was unlocking my car when my phone vibrated in my pocket. Ryder's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. But something about the timing felt too coincidental to ignore. Lyora. His voice was strained, caught between loyalty to our mother and something that might have been truth. Mom knows you're filing today. She told me to tell you. Drop this, or she'll contest Dad's competency in 2018 and drag his name through court. She'll say he wasn't capable of making that transfer. She'll say you manipulated him. I stood frozen on the courthouse steps, the filed ownership claim still warm in my hand. Tell her the deed says otherwise. Tell her Forrest Kendrick prepared documents that prove Dad was of sound mind. Tell her I'm not backing down. Lyora, she's serious. She'll destroy his reputation to win this. Then she'll have to explain to a judge why she forged his signature on a $52,000 loan while she's claiming he couldn't understand a property transfer. Ryder went quiet. Yeah, I said. I know about the loan. I know about all of it. So when you deliver her threat, deliver mine too. If she wants a war, I have ammunition. Ryder hung up before I could respond to his threat about the loan. I stood in the courthouse parking lot, holding my filed ownership claim, knowing the war had just escalated from cold to active. 2 days later, I returned to the Wilson County Clerk's office for certified copies of my filing. Ellen Briggs looked up when I approached her counter. Back again? That was fast. I need 3 certified copies of the ownership claim I filed on the 31st. She pulled up the file on her computer, typing with practiced efficiency. Give me a few minutes to print and certify them. While she worked, she made conversation the way people do when filling silence. Funny thing, you're the second person asking about that property in the last month. My attention sharpened. Someone else asked about 412 Plateau Road. Young man came in mid-December, said there were errors in a 2018 property transfer, same address as yours, wanted to know about filing corrections. My stomach dropped. Can you describe him? Late 20s, brown hair, professional looking, had a county employee badge, works in property assessments, I think. Ryder, my brother had a county assessor badge. What did you tell him? Same thing I tell everyone. You need the original grantor's signature to file corrections to recorded deeds. And if there's a dispute about the transfer's validity, that's a court matter, not a clerk's office matter. I walked out of the clerk's office into the cold January air, feeling the last thread of sibling loyalty snap. Mid-December, 2 weeks before the lockout. Ryder had tried to invalidate the deed before our mother even changed the locks. This wasn't him being caught in the middle of a family conflict. This was premeditated conspiracy. I wasn't caught in the middle. He chose her side from the beginning. I drove back to the motel in a fog of betrayal, the certified copies of my ownership claim sitting on the passenger seat like evidence in a trial I hadn't known I was already fighting. The Budget Inn had become a kind of purgatory. 12 days now since the lockout. 12 days of waking up to industrial carpet and walls that smelled like decades of transient lives. My emergency fund sat at $7,800. At $67 a night plus tax, I was burning through my safety net at nearly $500 a week. I couldn't afford to stay much longer, but I couldn't afford to leave without somewhere to go. When I opened the door to room 14, a cream-colored envelope lay on the floor just inside the threshold. Someone had slipped it under the door. No postage. Hand-delivered. I picked it up. Heavy paper. Expensive. My name written across the front in my mother's perfect cursive. Inside was a single card with a handwritten message. Leora, let us sit down as family and find peaceful resolution before this goes further. January 5th, 6:00 p.m. Your mother. Behind the card was a printed form. Mediation request for property dispute. Addressed to all property stakeholders. My name listed alongside my mother's and father's. The motel room smells like stale cigarettes and cheap detergent. I'd been here 12 days, and it still didn't feel like anything but limbo. I called Kendrick. She's invited me to dinner, I said, January 5th, and she included a mediation request form. She's building a paper trail, Kendrick said immediately, creating documentation that she attempted peaceful resolution before litigation. If you refuse to attend, she'll use it in court to paint you as the unreasonable party. And if I attend, she'll have witnesses, probably record the conversation, try to get you to say something she can use against you. So either way I lose. Not if we control the narrative. He paused. Attend, but I come with you, as your legal representative. We record the conversation too. Make it clear you're open to mediation through proper channels, not family pressure in a private home. She'll hate that. Good. Because this isn't about reconciliation. This is theater for a judge. and we need to perform better than she does. I looked at the invitation, at the formal mediation request printed on official-looking letterhead. So I walk into the trap knowing it's a trap. You walk into it armed. There's a difference. I hung up and sat on the motel bed with the invitation in my lap. January 5th was 3 days away, 48 hours, to prepare for a family dinner that had nothing to do with family and everything to do with legal positioning. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. "Please come, sweetheart. We need to talk like adults." The word sweetheart landed like a calculated weapon. I texted back, "I'll be there. I'm bringing my attorney." 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared. No response came. I examined the mediation request form more carefully. It was addressed to all property stakeholders, dated January 3rd, today, and requested voluntary mediation to avoid costly and emotionally damaging litigation. The form was already signed by my mother. A blank line waited for my signature. How do you sit across a dinner table from people actively trying to erase you? You do it with a lawyer, a recording device, and the understanding that every word spoken will be weighed later by someone in a black robe who doesn't care about your childhood memories or your mother's tears. I held the formal invitation in one hand and the mediation request in the other. Kendrick's voice echoed in my head. "Attend but bring me. Record everything. This is theater for a judge." I had 48 hours to prepare for a dinner that was really a deposition. I sat across from Forrest Kendrick at his desk at 2 o'clock on January 5th, 4 hours before the dinner, spreading out the handwritten invitation and the mediation request form. My mother had slipped Ellen Briggs at the county clerk's office. Outside the window of Kendrick and Associates, Clarksville's afternoon traffic moved past in predictable rhythms while we planned a counter-ambush. "Your mother's playing a specific game," Kendrick said, adjusting his reading glasses to examine the mediation form. Family dinner invitation creates emotional pressure, makes you look unreasonable if you refuse, but she's asking you to sign away legal rights at a social gathering where your father's presence makes confrontation uncomfortable. I'd come straight from my shift at Vanderbilt, still wearing scrubs under my winter coat, running on 3 hours of sleep and the kind of clarity that comes from sustained adrenaline. She thinks I'll fold if Dad's watching. "Will you?" "No." Kendrick studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "Good, because this mediation request is legally deficient in 3 separate ways." He pulled out a yellow legal pad and began making notes. First, it asks you to waive your right to independent legal counsel. Second, it proposes using a mediator your mother selected without your input. Third, it attempts to establish a 30-day resolution timeline that would require you to make binding decisions under artificial time pressure. So it's worthless? As a legal document, yes. As a psychological weapon, it's quite effective. He tapped the handwritten dinner invitation. "Your mother's counting on you being too polite to say no in front of your father, too guilty to refuse a peace offering, too tired to recognize the trap." I thought about the woman who'd called me on Christmas, her voice warm with concern until I mentioned the deed, then turning to permafrost. She's underestimating what 14 days locked out of your childhood home can do to your sense of family obligation. That's the advantage you have. Kendrick leaned back in his chair. "She still thinks you're the daughter who'll back down to keep the peace. You know you're the owner of 40% of that property with legal standing she can't touch." Outside, a semi-truck air horn blasted, breaking the office quiet. I glanced at the clock. 2:27 p.m. 3.5 hours until dinner. "What's the play?" I asked. Kendrick pulled a file folder from his desk drawer. "You go to dinner. You're polite. You listen to whatever speech she's prepared. When she asks you to sign the mediation form, you decline respectfully and tell her you're represented by counsel. She'll lose her mind. She'll try to apply pressure. Your father will probably stay quiet. He knew what he was doing when he transferred that deed. Ryder will back your mother because he thinks he's protecting his inheritance. Kendrick opened the folder. That's when you call me. You'll be there? I'll be parked 2 blocks away, starting at 6:30. You text me a single word, backup, and I arrive within 5 minutes with documentation she can't ignore. He slid 3 paper-clipped packets across the desk. Certified copies of the recorded deed, the irrevocable transfer clause highlighted, a letter outlining your legal position and our willingness to defend it in court if necessary. I picked up one packet, feeling the weight of official seals and legal formatting. This is a power move. This is a boundary. Kendrick's voice was firm. Your mother locked you out of your home 3 days before Christmas and is now trying to manipulate you into surrendering property rights your father specifically wanted you to have. We're not attacking. We're making your position clear. The difference mattered. I wasn't trying to hurt my mother or take the house from my parents. I was protecting what my father had given me, what he'd hidden from everyone, including my mother, for reasons that note in Ryder's truck had made painfully clear. What if she refuses to acknowledge the deed? Kendrick pulled out another document, this one in a sealed envelope with my name handwritten across the front. Then you give her this. What is it? A lawsuit ready to file. Quiet title action to establish your 40% ownership in court, plus a partition suit to force sale of the property if she continues to deny you access. He met my eyes. I'm not suggesting you actually want to file this. I'm giving you the nuclear option so she knows you have it. My hands shook slightly as I took the envelope. Inside was the power to blow up my family completely, to turn a property dispute into public legal warfare that would make the Lebanon Democrats' front page and give the church prayer circle gossip material for months. This escalates everything, I said quietly. No, your mother escalated when she changed those locks. This equalizes. Kendrick checked his watch. You have 3 hours. Go to the motel, shower, change into something that makes you feel strong. Arrive at 5:55. 5 minutes early shows respect, not desperation. Text me when you need me. I gathered the packets and the sealed envelope, sliding them into my bag next to the hospital note my father had hidden in Ryder's truck. Evidence and ammunition. I drove toward 412, Plateau Road as the winter sun dropped toward the horizon, arriving at exactly 5:55 p.m. My childhood home looked the same as it had 14 days ago, before the lockout, before the trash bags, before everything changed. Through the dining room window, I could see the table set for 4. My mother at the head, my father in his wheelchair to her right, Ryder across from him, and one empty chair with its back to the window. Waiting for me, I sat at the dinner table in Aunt Marlene's Crossville home, surrounded by extended family I hadn't seen in years, all pretending this was normal. The invitation had said 6 o'clock at Marlene's, not the intimate confrontation I'd braced for, but a performance with witnesses. I'm so glad we could all come together, my mother said, passing the pot roast. Family is everything, especially with your father so ill. Marlene Holcomb, my mother's older sister at 61, and a licensed notary who'd turned hospitality into surveillance, smiled from the head of the table. It's wonderful to see you girls working this out. Girls. I was 33, locked out of my home for 15 days, sitting among relatives, briefed to judge my response. Ryder sat across from me, avoiding eye contact. 2 cousins I barely remembered flanked my mother. My father wasn't here, too ill to travel, though I suspected his absence was strategic. The green bean casserole is delicious, I said. Your grandmother's recipe. cousin Tindra said. The same Tindra who'd revealed the $78,000 in debt, now playing gracious family member. Your mother made it special tonight. Every word was theater. I'd been cast as villain without reading the script while everyone else had rehearsed. How's work at Vanderbilt? Marlene asked. Still in the ICU? Still saving lives on 12-hour shifts, I said. The pot roast tasted like sawdust. Every bite was performance under surveillance. My mother set down her fork. I know this has been difficult. Your father's illness, the financial strain, the misunderstandings. She looked at me with practiced sorrow. I just want us to be a family again. Misunderstandings. The word sat between us like a loaded weapon. That's what we all want, I said. Then perhaps after dessert, we can discuss moving forward. Her voice carried inevitability, as if the outcome had been decided, and I was being granted the courtesy of formal consent. Marlene brought out pecan pie. The conversation drifted to safe topics: weather, church gossip, someone's grandson's college acceptance. I watched the clock tick toward 7. Kendrick was parked 2 blocks from my childhood home in Lebanon, not here in Crossville, 40 miles east. My phone sat in my purse. One text, and he'd come. But I wanted to see what my mother would do. At 7 o'clock, she stood and retrieved a manila folder from Marlene's sideboard. The room went quiet. I need to be honest with you all, she said, her voice breaking slightly. The medical bills have put us in an impossible position. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. I've found a buyer willing to pay $270,000 for the house, but I need Leora's cooperation. The folder landed in front of me. Open it, she said gently. Inside was a quitclaim deed, professionally printed, with my name as grantor and my mother as grantee. Below the property description, consideration, $15,000 upon execution. $15,000 for my 40% share of a house selling for $270,000. The math was insultingly simple. 40% was $108,000. She was offering less than 14% of what my share was worth. How do you say no to saving your father when 6 people are staring at you like you're the villain? Mom's 3 months behind on the mortgage, Ryder said. This is the only way to save Dad's home. Save the home by selling it. The logic was deliberately broken, designed to sound reasonable to people who hadn't spent 15 days researching Tennessee property law from a motel room. You want me to sign away $108,000 for $15,000. I kept my voice level. And pretend Dad didn't give me that 40% for a reason. Your father was heavily medicated when he signed that deed, my mother said. He didn't understand what he was doing. The competency challenge, deployed as threat, disguised as concern. Marlene's a notary, my mother continued. She brought her seal tonight. We can execute this properly, witnesses and all, and I can accept the buyer's offer tomorrow. Marlene opened her purse and withdrew her notary seal, setting it beside the folder. The click of metal on wood was obscenely loud. They'd planned this, not just dinner, but my signature with legal authority and family witnesses. My mother had choreographed every element: the setting, the audience, the emotional manipulation, the financial urgency, the notarization. I stared at the quitclaim deed, reading the calculation behind her grief-stricken mask. There's something else, she said, sliding a second document across the table. A single page on professional letterhead. Statement of voluntary relinquishment. 3 paragraphs explaining that I, Leora Prescott, voluntarily relinquish all property claims to support father's medical care and family financial stability, and that I acknowledge the transfer deed was executed during a period of medical confusion and do not contest its reversal. Pre-written, legally binding if I signed, designed to make me look heartless if I refused. The pen sat on the papers, waiting. The room went silent. My mother, Ryder, Aunt Marlene, Tindra, and 2 cousins watched me stare at the quitclaim deed offering $15,000 for my $108,000 share. My mother's voice dropped to a whisper. Sign it, Leora, or I file the competency challenge tomorrow and prove your father was mentally unfit when he gave you that deed. I pushed the quitclaim deed back across the table toward my mother, untouched. The pen rolled off the papers and onto Marlene's tablecloth with a soft click. No, I said. The word hung in the air like a declaration of war. My mother's carefully constructed grief-stricken expression flickered. Leora, think about what you're doing. Your father needs... I won't sign away $114,000 for $15,000, I said, keeping my voice steady. Dad gave me 40% ownership in 2018, legally filed, notarized, irrevocable, March 14th, 2018, to be exact. Ryder's head snapped up. Marlene's hand froze on her coffee cup. You have no proof of that deed, my mother said, but her voice had lost its warm certainty. I have the county filing receipt from March 14th, 2018. I have the recorded deed with the Wilson County Clerk's seal. And I know about your $52,000 home equity loan you took out in 2022 without telling Dad. The room went absolutely silent. My mother's face drained of color. That's a lie. It's documented at First Tennessee Bank. You forged Dad's signature on the loan application because he was in ICU at the time and couldn't sign himself. The bank didn't verify because you'd been banking there for 30 years. I looked at Ryder. That's where most of the $78,000 in debt comes from, the home equity loan you told me about in the Kroger parking lot. Ryder's face went pale. He'd told me about the debt, but hadn't known I'd trace it back to its source. You're making wild accusations, my mother said, but her hands were shaking. Tindra gave me the bank records, I said quietly. She was worried about the debt. She didn't know you'd forged the signature until I showed her the timeline. Dad was hospitalized when those papers were signed. Aunt Marlene quietly set down her notary seal. There would be no signature tonight, no legal performance to witness. This is family business, my mother hissed, not something to air in front of everyone. You made it public when you staged this dinner. I looked around the table at the cousins who'd been recruited as witnesses. You invited them to watch me refuse to help my dying father. But they should know what they're witnessing. You want me to sign away my legal ownership so you can sell Dad's house to cover debt you created by taking loans in his name. Your father knew about those loans, my mother said. Then you won't mind if I ask him directly, once he's well enough to speak without your supervision. My mother stood abruptly, gripping the edge of the table. You ungrateful! I also know Ryder went to the county clerk in mid-December trying to file corrections to erase that deed. I continued. Ellen Briggs told me herself. He tried to claim the original filing was fraudulent. She rejected it because there was no evidence of fraud, and the deed had been on record for 6 years. Ryder's coffee cup trembled in his hand, the ceramic rattling against the saucer. You told me she didn't know about the deed, my mother said to Ryder, her voice rising. I thought, Ryder started. You thought wrong, I said. I've known about the deed since December 23rd, when Forrest Kendrick showed me Dad's letter. I've spent the last 2 weeks researching every aspect of Tennessee property law, tracing every loan, checking every county record. Forrest Kendrick, my mother repeated. You hired a lawyer. I hired the best property attorney in Middle Tennessee, and I filed my formal ownership claim with Wilson County on December 31st. You were officially notified on January 4th, 2 days ago. You knew I wasn't signing anything tonight. The accusation landed like a bomb. My mother's performance facade shattered completely. You filed a claim, she whispered. Quiet title action establishing my 40% ownership with supporting documentation. The county has copies of everything. The original 2018 deed, the irrevocable transfer clause, proof of my continuous Tennessee residency for the last 6 years, and a detailed timeline of your attempts to deny or erase my ownership. Marlene looked at my mother with something between shock and calculation. Colleen, you told me she didn't know about any deed. You said this was about a misunderstanding from when Otis was medicated. It was a misunderstanding, my mother said desperately. Otis didn't know what he was signing. He was confused, medicated. He wrote me a letter, I said, dated March 13th, 2018, the day before he filed the deed, explaining exactly why he was transferring 40% ownership to me. He knew what he was doing. He was protecting his investment from your debt. The room went silent except for my mother's ragged breathing. She stared at me across the table, and I watched the transformation happen in real time. The grieving wife act dissolved. The concerned mother disappeared. What remained was pure calculation and fury. You want war? Her voice was barely above a whisper, but sharp enough to cut. I'll drag your father's name through every court in Tennessee. I'll prove he was incompetent, and you manipulated a sick old man for his property. But her voice shook. She knew she'd lost control. My mother stood abruptly, knocking her chair backward. You'll hear from my attorney Monday morning. I'm filing for declaratory judgment. You'll wish you took the $15,000. She grabbed her purse and coat. Ryder stood automatically, following her toward the door like he'd been doing his entire life. I sat alone at Marlene's dinner table, surrounded by shocked relatives who'd come to witness a prodigal daughter's return and instead watched a family implode. The real legal war was about to start. Before I could stand to leave, Aunt Marlene's voice cut through the silence. How could you do this to your own mother while your father is dying? I looked at her across the table, this woman who'd notarized 100 documents in her career and knew exactly what legal manipulation looked like. She'd watched my mother try to force a signature on a fraudulent quitclaim deed an hour ago, but somehow I was the villain. Did you hear what I said? I asked quietly. About the forged loan, the debt, Ryder's attempt to erase the deed. Your mother is trying to keep a roof over your father's head, and you're demanding your cut like some vulture. Marlene's face was flushed with righteous anger. She's drowning in medical bills, and you're talking about property percentages. Dale Holcomb, Marlene's husband at 58, who'd spent 30 years in construction and held strong opinions about family loyalty, pushed back from the table. Otis raised you, fed you, put you through school, and this is how you repay him? By hiding deeds and hiring lawyers. Dad gave me that deed, I said. In 2018, did any of you ask why? Or why Mom hid it from me for 5 years? Because you do exactly this, Marlene said. Hold his property hostage while he's too sick to defend himself. The cousins who'd sat silent through dinner were nodding. One was already typing on her phone, probably texting the family group chat with her version of events. I'm not holding anything hostage. I'm protecting what Dad specifically wanted me to have. By refusing to help pay his medical bills, Dale's voice rose. That's what family does. We help each other. We don't lawyer up and file claims. Defending yourself against family feels like drowning. Every explanation just pulls you deeper. I stood, gathering my coat and purse. When you're ready to hear my side, call me. Until then, believe whatever version makes you feel better about not asking questions. I drove back to the motel through January darkness, my hands shaking on the wheel. The family I'd grown up with, Sunday dinners and Christmas mornings and birthday celebrations, had chosen sides in under an hour, and I was on the wrong one. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 7 a.m., Aunt Greta from Nashville lecturing me about honoring my parents, Uncle Raymond's wife crying about how disappointed my father would be, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 3 years texting, "Don't contact me again. What you're doing to Uncle Otis is disgusting." By noon, the Facebook posts started. I didn't have to see them. Coworkers at Cumberland Medical Center ICU told me. Photos of my parents' house. Emotional captions about greedy children and dying fathers. Shares and comments from relatives and church members spreading my mother's version. I was suing my sick parents for their home. At 2 p.m., during my shift break, I checked my phone and saw Tindra Gallagher's post. The same cousin who'd given me the bank records 2 weeks ago, who'd been worried about my mother's debt, had posted, "Family takes care of each other. Money isn't everything. Praying for Aunt Colleen during this difficult time." She'd folded. Even the one ally who'd helped me had chosen the family narrative over the truth. "Hey, Leora," Sarah, one of the ICU nurses I'd worked with for 4 years, approached carefully. "Someone posted on Facebook that you're forcing your parents out of their house. That's not true, right?" "It's complicated," I said, "because people are saying—" "I know what people are saying." I kept my voice level. "My mother changed the locks on me 3 days before Christmas. I'm not forcing anyone out of anywhere. I'm protecting property my father legally gave me." Sarah nodded slowly, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. She'd heard the gossip first. My explanation sounded like justification. That night, I sat in the motel room with the lights off. The thin walls carried sounds of a TV next door, canned laughter from some sitcom. My phone screen glowed with messages I couldn't answer, because every defense sounded like an attack, and every explanation required more explanation. They believed her version without asking mine. I was the villain in a story I didn't write. I'd lost my family, my reputation, my place in the community where I'd lived my entire life. And the legal war hadn't even started yet. Monday morning's mail brought a single envelope with no return address, postmarked Lebanon, Tennessee. Inside was a photocopied handwritten note on lined paper, the kind from a legal pad. The words were simple. "Lyora, if you're reading this, Colleen tried to take what I gave you. Don't let her. You earned this by being there when nobody else was. The property is yours by right and by love. Don't back down. Dad." The date at the top, March 10th, 2018. 4 days before the deed was filed. 6 years before this nightmare started. The handwriting was unmistakably my father's. The same slanted script from birthday cards and grocery lists, and the note writer had kept in his truck. My father had known, not just anticipated, known with certainty that my mother would try to erase what he'd given me. He'd prepared for this exact battle and left evidence behind, insurance against her denial. But the envelope had no return address and no explanation. Someone had sent this to me now, in the middle of the fight, as proof or weapon or both. Who knew this note existed? Who had access to it? And what else had my father left behind? I sat staring at the anonymous note in the dim motel light when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. 4 words. I meant it. Dad. My hands shook as I read it again. Then a second text appeared. Nurse helping me type. Gave you deed 2018 to protect you from your mother. She wanted everything for Ryder. I saw it coming. Dad. A third message followed immediately. Don't back down. I'm still here. She can't speak for me. I called the number. A woman's voice answered, quiet and careful. This is Brenda Calhoun. I'm the ICU nurse on your father's floor. We've worked the same unit for 8 years. He asked me to help him text you. Is he okay? My voice cracked. He's stable, but he's been asking about you for days. Your mother told him you were too busy with work to visit. Brenda paused. He asked me to look up your number in his phone and send those messages. He dictated every word. Can I talk to him? Your mother restricted visitors to immediate family only, and she told the charge nurse you're estranged. But he wanted you to know he remembers giving you that deed. He knows exactly what he did and why. I pressed my palm against my mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. 6 years. My father had carried this intention for 6 years, knowing my mother would eventually try exactly what she was doing now. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for helping him. He's a good man, Brenda said quietly. And what your mother's saying about him being confused, that's not what I see. He's weak, but his mind is sharp. He knows what's happening. After we hung up, I texted back, I love you, Dad. I won't let her erase what you did. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, proud of you, Dad. I read my father's words 3 times, crying in a motel room that smelled like mildew and survival. For the first time since the lockout 23 days ago, I wasn't alone in this fight. My father was still here, still choosing me, still protecting me the only way he could from a hospital bed. The next morning, I finished my shift at Cumberland Medical Center at 7:15 and walked to my car in the January cold. Ryder was waiting, leaning against my driver's door. We need to talk, he said. I stopped 3 feet away, keys in hand. I'm listening. I filed the paperwork. January 12th. I'm contesting your claim with adverse possession. Mom lived there, maintained it, paid the mortgage. You didn't. The words hit like physical blows. You know that's a lie. You saw Dad's text. He gave me that deed deliberately. I saw a text from an unknown number. Ryder wouldn't meet my eyes. Could be anyone. It was Dad. Brenda Calhoun helped him type it. Or you're making that up. But his voice shook. He didn't believe his own accusation. Mid-story, CTA. Before I tell you what happened in that parking lot next, comment A, if you think Ryder will break from Mom's control, or B, if he's too trapped to help me. Add one short reason. Please note, some details ahead are adapted for narrative impact, though the core conflict is real. Mid-story, CTA. The parking lot was freezing. My breath fogged in the January air while Ryder shifted his weight, unable to meet my eyes. He looked exhausted, cornered, 20 pounds thinner than at Christmas. Why are you doing this? I asked quietly. You know the truth. I owe Mom $28,000. The admission came out flat, defeated. She co-signed my property appraisal business loan 3 years ago. If I don't help her now, she calls the note and I lose everything. My business, my truck, my house. So you'll lie to a county clerk and commit fraud to save yourself? I'm not committing fraud. I'm filing a legitimate adverse possession claim based on what? That Mom changed the locks and forced me out so she could pretend I abandoned the property? I stepped closer. Dad is still alive, Ryder. He can testify. He can tell the court exactly why he gave me that deed. Mom scheduled formal mediation for January 11th, tomorrow. Her attorney wants to establish a record of you being unreasonable before we file the adverse possession claim on the 12th. The strategy clicked into place. 2-pronged legal attack. Mediation, showing me as difficult and unwilling to compromise, followed immediately by a county filing claiming I'd abandoned my ownership claim through non-use of the property. Mother would have a paper trail showing she tried to negotiate while I was living in a motel and refusing to maintain my supposed investment. You planned this together, I said. Mom planned it. He stopped. I don't have a choice. You always have a choice. You're choosing debt over truth. Ryder looked at me finally, and I saw something I'd never seen in my younger brother's face before. Shame mixed with resignation. You don't understand what it's like owing her money. She owns you. He walked away, across the parking lot toward his truck. I stood alone in the freezing morning, keys still in my hand. 2 legal attacks, 48 hours. I called Kendrick from my car, engine running for heat. They scheduled mediation for January 11th and county filing for January 12th. We have 2 days to prepare for both. Kendrick's pause told me everything. This was the climax we'd been building toward, the moment my mother would make her formal competency attack public and try to erase my father's protection in a single coordinated legal strike. "I'll file our counter motions today," he said finally. "And Leora, bring that text thread from your father to mediation. We're going to need it." Kendrick and I spread documents across his conference table at midnight on January 10th, 36 hours until Ryder's filing. I'd worked my shift, slept 3 hours, and driven straight here with everything: deed copies, bank records, text screenshots, the note in my father's handwriting. "We need to prove 3 things," Kendrick said. "Your father's intent was clear, the transfer was legally sound, and Ryder's challenge is fraudulent conspiracy. I have Dad's text from the ICU nurse, the 2018 note, and the original deed copy." I laid them on the table like evidence in a trial that hadn't started yet. Patricia Sweeney, the paralegal who'd worked at Kendrick & Associates for 12 years and specialized in property law documentation, arrived at 1 a.m. with a banker's box of county records. Property tax payments, deed transfers, ownership histories back to 1995. She spread tax records across the table. "Leora, you've been paying property taxes on your 40% share since 2019, 5 consecutive years. That's occupancy evidence even while living there." I stared at the payment receipts, automatic deductions every November for my portion of the annual tax bill. Patricia had turned them into proof of ownership. "That destroys any adverse possession claim," Kendrick said. "You can't abandon property you're actively paying taxes on. The county has 5 years of receipts proving otherwise." The conference room smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. Fluorescent lights hummed while dawn broke outside. We organized evidence into color-coded binders: blue for property documents, green for financial records proving my mother's debt and forged signatures, yellow for my father's statements, red for Ryder's December conspiracy. "We're building a narrative," Patricia said, "not just defending, but showing a pattern of deliberate fraud spanning 6 years." By 6 a.m., we had 3 complete binders and a timeline poster showing every date from the 2018 transfer through the January 12 deadline. Kendrick spread it like a battle map. "This is strong," he said. "Your father's intent is documented. Your ownership is proven through tax payments, and your mother's financial motive is clear." I went home to shower and sleep 4 hours, then returned at 6 p.m. on January 11th, the day mediation was supposed to happen, 18 hours before Ryder's filing. Kendrick was on the phone when I arrived. His expression told me something had changed. I hung up and slid a printed email across his desk. "Ellen Briggs sent her statement. Read this." The county clerk's letterhead topped a detailed account. On December 18th, 2023, at approximately 2:45 p.m., a male individual matching the description of Ryder Prescott entered the Wilson County Clerk's office and requested forms to correct alleged errors in a 2018 property transfer deed for 412 Plateau Road, Lebanon, Tennessee. When asked to specify the errors, he claimed the original filing was fraudulent and should be voided. I informed him that absent a court order or proof of fraud, recorded deeds cannot be administratively corrected. He departed without filing any forms. December 18th, 4 days before the lockout. "They tried to erase the deed first," I said, "and when that failed, they evicted me. Premeditated fraud." Kendrick's voice was hard. This isn't a family disagreement anymore. This is attempted fraud, conspiracy to defraud, and elder abuse of your father. My hands shook from exhaustion and caffeine, but every document I touched was ammunition. We have them, I said. We have documentation. Now Kendrick's laptop chimed. He opened his email, and his expression went cold. Son of a bitch. What? He turned the screen toward me. Email from Gerald Whitmore, attorney at law, timestamped 7:03 p.m. Please be advised that the January 11th mediation session is canceled. Our client will be filing formal complaint in Wilson County Circuit Court tomorrow, January 12th, 2024, at 9:00 a.m., concurrent with related county clerk filings. Further communication will proceed through formal legal channels. No mediation, straight to court. They're skipping negotiation entirely, I said. At 9 a.m. tomorrow, exactly when Ryder files his adverse possession claim. Kendrick checked his watch. Coordinated dual attack, circuit court lawsuit, and county filing simultaneously, creating two separate legal actions we defend at the same time. Then we counter both? We file our countersuit tonight. I've had it ready since yesterday. Quiet title action establishing your 40% ownership, petition to invalidate adverse possession claims, and fraud complaint against your mother and brother for conspiracy and elder abuse. He clicked print, and the office printer hummed. We file this electronically within the hour. Then we meet them at the courthouse tomorrow at 8:30 with every piece of evidence we've compiled. The preparation phase was over. The war went public in 14 hours. Kendrick closed his laptop and looked at me. Get some sleep if you can. Tomorrow morning, this becomes real litigation. Your family will see you walk into that courthouse as the plaintiff in a fraud case against them. There's no going back after that. I thought about my father's text. Don't back down. I know, I said. File it. At 6 o'clock on the morning of January 12th, 3 hours before the courthouse battle, Kendrick called my motel room with a simple question. Do you want to win quietly, or do you want the truth on public record? I'd slept 2 hours, then given up and spent the rest of the night staring at the ceiling. What's the difference? Come to the office. We need to talk strategy. 20 minutes later, I sat across from him in his conference room while winter sun broke through the windows. The evidence binders from our all-night session were still stacked on the table. We can fight this in depositions and briefs, Kendrick said. Most families keep property disputes private, quieter, less painful. We file the countersuit, they file their lawsuit, and we settle somewhere in the middle 6 months from now. You keep your 40%, they save face, everyone moves on. That's the normal way. That's the civilized way. But there's another option. He pulled out his phone and showed me an email time-stamped 12:17 a.m. from Gerald Whitmore, mother's attorney. Subject line, settlement proposal. They called at midnight, offering $50,000 if you sign an NDA and drop all claims. No admission of wrongdoing, no public record, just money and silence. I stared at the settlement offer. $50,000 to stay silent about fraud, to let lies stand. $50,000 is barely half of what my 40% is worth, I said slowly, and the NDA means I can't tell anyone what really happened. Correct. Your family keeps believing your mother's version. You're still the greedy daughter who sued her sick parents, but you walk away with cash and no legal battle. She's buying my silence. She's trying to. Kendrick set down his phone, which tells me her case is weaker than she's pretending. People with strong legal positions don't offer settlement at midnight before filing. I looked at the evidence binders, my father's texts, the deed he'd signed 6 years ago, proof of Ryder's fraud attempt, documentation of my mother's debt and forged signatures. She told everyone I'm stealing from my dying father, I said. They believe her lies because I've been silent. If I take that settlement, the lies win. Then we go public. Kendrick leaned forward. Public confrontation at the clerk's office when Ryder files his challenge means everything goes on record. Every lie, every document, every witness. No more shadows. No more he said, she said. Just official county records and sworn statements. In front of the family. In front of whoever shows up. The clerk's office is public record. If your mother wants to claim your father was incompetent, she has to say it in front of Ellen Briggs and file supporting documentation. If Ryder wants to claim adverse possession, he has to do it while you present 5 years of tax payment receipts. 3 weeks ago, my mother had locked me out in darkness. Now I was choosing to turn on every light. I want it on record, I said, all of it. Kendrick nodded slowly. Then you need to invite them. Make it clear this isn't an ambush. It's an invitation to hear your side with documentation and witnesses. I pulled out my phone and opened a new message. The recipient list felt like writing to strangers. Mother, Ryder, Aunt Marlene, Tindra, Uncle Dale, the cousins who'd watched me refuse to sign at that disastrous dinner. I typed carefully. I'm inviting you to Wilson County Clerk's office at 10 a.m. today. Bring whoever you want. I'm presenting every document publicly. The deed Dad gave me in 2018. His recent text confirming his intent, proof of the debt you've been hiding, and evidence of the fraud attempt in December. You've told everyone I'm stealing from my dying father. Come hear the truth in front of official witnesses, or admit you chose lies over facts. My thumb hovered over the send button. This is bold, Kendrick said quietly, and risky. You're cornering them in front of official witnesses. Let them call me greedy in front of the county clerk while I show Dad's texts, the deed he signed, and Ryder's attempt to commit fraud. Let them explain why they locked me out 4 days after he tried to erase that deed at the clerk's office. I hit send. The message delivered. 3 dots appeared under my mother's name, then disappeared. No response. Kendrick and I gathered the evidence binders, loaded them into his car, and drove toward Lebanon. The January morning was cold and clear, the kind of winter day that makes everything look sharp-edged and unavoidable. My phone buzzed at 9:20 a.m. Text from Aunt Marlene. We'll be there. Some of us want to hear your side. Not I'll be there. We, plural, family members breaking ranks. Kendrick pulled into the Wilson County Clerk's office parking lot at 9:45 a.m. My mother's car was already there, parked near the entrance. So was Ryder's truck, and Aunt Marlene's sedan. 3 more cars I recognized from Christmas gatherings and birthday parties, and the life I'd had before the lockout. The family was gathering for a confrontation that would be recorded in official county records. No more private accusations. No more hidden documents. No more controlling the narrative in whispered phone calls and Facebook posts. Ready? Kendrick asked. I picked up the evidence binder with my father's texts and the deed he'd signed to protect me. Through the clerk's office window, I could see people already inside, waiting. Ready, I said. Inside Wilson County Clerk's office, I walked past my mother, Ryder, Aunt Marlene, Uncle Dale, Tindra, and 3 cousins I'd grown up with, carrying the evidence binder to Ellen Briggs's counter. The silence was thick enough to choke on. I'm finalizing my 40% ownership claim filed December 31st, I said to Ellen, sliding the documents across. Here's the supporting documentation: original deed, tax payment records, father's written confirmation. Ellen began reviewing the paperwork with the methodical efficiency of someone who'd processed 30 years of Lebanon's official business. Behind me, I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. Ellen, you know our family. My mother's voice carried across the small office. This is my daughter trying to take her father's house while he's dying. Ma'am, I process legal documents. Ellen didn't look up from the deed copy. If you have filing to contest, you need forms and evidence. A man in a dark suit stepped forward from where he'd been standing beside my mother. Gregory Marsh, attorney in his mid-50s who specialized in estate litigation and competency challenges, opened his briefcase with practiced precision. Ms. Briggs, I'm Gregory Marsh, representing Mrs. Prescott. I have medical records from Cumberland Medical Center documenting Mr. Otis Prescott's cognitive impairment in 2018 when this alleged transfer occurred. Ellen took the folder, glanced at the medical records, and handed them back. The county clerk's office cannot adjudicate questions of competency. That requires circuit court jurisdiction. I process properly filed legal documents. If the deed was recorded, notarized, and filed according to Tennessee law, it's valid until a court says otherwise. Marcia's expression flickered with frustration. My mother's face went red. The clerk's office smelled like paper and bureaucracy. The official stamp sat on Ellen Briggs's desk like a gavel waiting to fall. The 2018 deed transfer was legally executed, Ellen said, reviewing my documentation. Properly notarized, correctly filed, all fees paid. Your December 31 ownership claim filing is complete and accurate. Tax payment records support continuous co-ownership. She looked at me. I'm approving this for official record. Wait. Ryder stepped forward, pulling folded papers from his jacket. I'm filing adverse possession challenge to that deed. She didn't live at the property, didn't maintain it, abandoned her claim for years. Ms. Briggs, Kendrick's voice cut through the room. Before you accept that filing, I'm presenting your own sworn statement from our records request. He laid a notarized document on the counter. December 18th, 2023. Do you recall this man attempting to file false corrections to the 2018 deed? Ellen Briggs's face changed when she read her own statement about Ryder. Her professional neutrality hardened into something colder. She looked up at Ryder, then at the adverse possession papers in his hand. On December 18th, you entered this office and requested forms to void a property deed by claiming fraud where none existed. I told you then that required court order or proof. You left without filing. That was just, I was asking questions. Your mother changed her daughter's locks 4 days later. Ellen's voice was quiet, but iron hard. Now you're here, trying to claim the property through adverse possession. I cannot accept filings from someone who attempted to falsify county property records 3 weeks ago. Your claim is denied. The room went silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights. You can't deny a legal filing, my mother started. I can when the filer has documented history of attempting fraud in this office. Ellen picked up her official stamp. The county has standards. Your son tried to erase a legally recorded deed through false claims. That's on record now. She pressed the stamp onto my ownership claim with a solid thunk that echoed in the small office. Official, permanent, county record. Lyora Prescott's 40% ownership claim is hereby approved and entered into Wilson County property records, recorded this 12th day of January, 2024. Ellen slid the stamped document across the counter to me. The county seal was raised and official, impossible to erase or deny. My mother grabbed it from the counter before I could touch it, reading the certification with shaking hands. Her face went white. Colleen, Aunt Marlene's voice cut through the silence. You lied to all of us. Otis gave her that deed legally, and you've been trying to steal it. That's not... My mother's voice cracked. He was confused, medicated. He texted her last week, confirming he meant it. Marlene looked at the cousins and Uncle Dale. We all heard the evidence. The deed is real. The texts are real. Ryder tried to commit fraud in December. She's been telling the truth. Ryder wouldn't meet my eyes. His fraud was now permanent county record, witnessed by family members who'd believed his mother's lies for 3 weeks. You haven't won. My mother's voice shook with rage barely contained. I'm filing in circuit court today. I'll prove he was incompetent and you manipulated him. This is just a county filing. A real court will see what you did. She shoved the stamped document back at me and turned toward the door, Gregory Marsh following. Mrs. Prescott, Kendrick called after her, talk to my attorney. She didn't look back. We're filing formal lawsuit this afternoon. Competency challenge, undue influence, elder abuse. You want a legal war? You'll get one. The door slammed behind her, leaving Ryder standing alone in the middle of the clerk's office, exposed as a fraud, in front of the aunt, uncle, and cousins who'd eaten pot roast while they watched him help orchestrate a lie. I held the stamped ownership claim in my hands, official proof that my father had given me 40% of our family home, that I'd protected it despite lockouts and lies and family pressure, that the truth had won in at least one government office. But my mother's threat hung in the air like smoke from a fire that wasn't finished burning. I found my mother in the clerk's office lobby, leaning against the wall with the stamped ownership document crumpled in her fist. Kendrick was still inside gathering our copies. We were alone. You won, she said without looking at me. Congratulations. I didn't answer. I just waited. I found that deed in 2020. Her voice was flat, defeated. Going through his papers after his heart attack, I saw what he'd done. I knew exactly what it meant. You've known for 3 years? I waited, hoping. She stopped, jaw clenched. Hoping what? That he'd die before I found out he protected me from you? She flinched, but didn't deny it. He gave you 40% of everything we built together, 37 years of marriage, and he chose you over his own wife. I had every right to fight back. The admission hung between us like a confession she'd never meant to make. You didn't fight back, I said quietly. You committed fraud. You tried to erase a legal document. You convinced Ryder to lie to a county clerk. You locked me out of my home 3 days before Christmas and told everyone I was stealing from my dying father. What was I supposed to do? Her voice rose. Accept that he gave away half our house without telling me? Just smile and let you take what should go to your brother? It wasn't half. It was 40%. And he had every right to transfer his property however he wanted. Not when he was medicated and confused. I wasn't confused in 2018. I kept my voice level. You know that. That's why you tried fraud first and eviction second. You knew the transfer was irrevocable. I realized my mother had looked at that deed for 3 years and chose fraud over honesty, conspiracy over conversation. She straightened, smoothing her coat with shaking hands. This isn't over. Gregory's filing in circuit court this afternoon. We'll prove your father wasn't competent in 2018 and you manipulated him. With what evidence? Medical records, witness testimony, your own nursing background showing you had access and knowledge to exploit his condition. She met my eyes finally. You think you won today? The county clerk stamping your papers doesn't mean anything when a judge hears the truth. The truth is that Dad loved me enough to protect me from you, and you can't forgive either of us for that. She walked away without answering, leaving me alone in the lobby with the official document that proved my father had chosen to give me something she couldn't take away. I drove to Sumner Regional Rehabilitation Center in Gallatin, 40 minutes north, where they'd moved my father after his second stroke. I hadn't seen him since December 22, the day before the lockout. 3 weeks of legal warfare while he recovered in a facility my mother had kept me from visiting. The rehab facility smelled like antiseptic and cafeteria food. My father's room was at the end of the hall, door half open. He sat in a wheelchair by the window, thinner than I remembered, face showing the asymmetry stroke leaves behind. "Dad?" He turned his head slowly. Recognition lit his eyes immediately, and his working hand reached toward me. I crossed the room and took his hand. It was thin, but his grip was fierce. "I got the ownership approved," I said, pulling up a chair beside him. "The county stamped it today. You gave me 40% in 2018. Did you mean for me to have it?" His mouth worked, struggling with words the stroke had stolen. "Why, yours." He mouthed it clearly, precisely. "Yours. Mom tried to take it. She tried to erase what you did for me. She's been fighting this for weeks." He tapped my hand twice, urgent, trying to communicate something beyond what his limited speech could express. Protected you. From her? 2 taps, yes. I showed him the stamped document. He studied it with the focused intensity I remembered from before the strokes, reading every line. When he reached the county seal, certifying my ownership, his eyes filled with tears. "She found the deed in 2020, I said quietly. "She's known for 3 years and hid it from me. She locked me out of the house 3 days before Christmas. She told the whole family I was stealing from you." His face darkened with an anger I'd rarely seen. He shook his head firmly, then pulled me closer with surprising strength. "She can't." The words came with immense effort, each syllable a battle. "Can't take it. Lawyer said. Irrevocable." I went still. "You asked the lawyer about that? Back in 2018? 2 taps. Yes. I knew she would fight it. He'd prepared for this exact battle 6 years ago. "Why did you give it to me?" I whispered. "You stayed." His working hand squeezed mine. Hospital. Every time. You stayed. I thought about all the ICU shifts I'd taken, the nights I'd sat beside his hospital bed when he was too sick to know I was there, the phone calls from my mother saying she'd come back from Nashville if he was really dying. He'd noticed, he'd remembered, and he'd protected me the only way he knew how. We sat in silence, his hand in mine, while winter afternoon light filtered through the rehab center window. For the first time in 3 weeks, I felt peace. My phone rang at 4:30, Kendrick's name on the screen. "She filed," he said, without preamble. "Circuit court lawsuit at 4 p.m., alleging incompetence, undue influence, and financial exploitation. Trial date is February 15th, 2024. I looked at my father. He was watching me, reading my expression. 34 days, I said. 34 days to build the defense and prepare your father to testify if he's able. The emotional war is over, Leora. Now comes the legal one." My father tapped my hand twice. "Ready. Fighting." 5 days after the lawsuit filing, I unlocked the door to a 1-bedroom apartment in Crossville. $675 a month, modest and mine. The legal war was coming in 4 weeks, but I needed a place to stand while I fought it. The apartment was empty, except for possibilities. Kitchen with basic appliances, living room with carpet that had seen better days but was clean, bedroom window overlooking the parking lot and distant Tennessee hills, bathroom with dated fixtures that worked. It wasn't the house I'd grown up in, but nobody could change these locks on me. Tindra arrived the next morning with a borrowed truck carrying everything I owned. Furniture from storage, clothes from the motel, kitchen basics I'd bought at Walmart, my nursing scrubs, and the sealed plastic folder containing every legal document that proved my father had given me 40% of our family home. It's small, Tindra said, helping me carry a second-hand couch through the door. But it's yours. Nobody can lock you out of this one. We spent the day unpacking. The apartment manager, Joyce Emerson, a woman in her late 60s who managed the complex, stopped by with keys and paperwork. Previous tenant was here 8 years, she said conversationally. Elderly woman, sweet lady, died last month, heart attack. Her kids cleaned out the place in 3 hours, and we never saw them again. Hadn't visited her once in those 8 years. She said it matter-of-factly, but I saw the mirror clearly. My mother's future after burning every family bridge for money and control. Alone in an apartment nobody visited. Her children too distant or too damaged to care when she needed them. I'm sorry to hear that, I said quietly. Joyce shrugged. Happens more than you'd think. Anyway, rent's due first of the month. Maintenance requests go through the office. The apartment smelled like fresh paint and possibility. Sunlight streamed through clean windows overlooking the parking lot and distant hills. By evening, the space was functional. Couch against one wall. Small dining table Tindra had donated. Bed frame assembled in the bedroom. Kitchen stocked with basics. Coffee, bread, eggs. The survival staples of someone who worked 12-hour shifts and came home exhausted. I still have $7,200 left in savings, I told Tindra while we hung my work scrubs in the closet. Rent is $675. I can survive until the legal stuff settles. You've been planning for this. I've been saving since I was 25. Emergency fund for exactly this kind of emergency. I smoothed a scrub top on its hanger. I just never thought the emergency would be my own mother. Tindra was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I should have told you about the debt when I first found out. You told me when I needed to know. And you're here now. That matters more. By January 20, the apartment was livable. Second-hand furniture that didn't match but functioned. Stocked kitchen. Work scrubs hanging in the closet, organized by color. A space that was modest but stable, built with my own money and choices. Tindra came over that evening with pizza and paper plates because I didn't own proper dishes yet. We sat on the living room floor, backs against the couch, eating pepperoni and mushroom while winter darkness settled outside. The trial's in 4 weeks, I said. Kendrick says we have a strong case, but it could go either way. If the judge believes Mom's incompetency claim, I could lose everything. Whatever happens with the house, you already won. Tindra gestured at the apartment around us. You've got your job, your savings, your independence. She can't take that. I looked around the small apartment. Cheap furniture, bare walls, second-hand everything. I built this, not inherited, not given, earned. That's mine no matter what the court says. Tindra had become the sister I'd never had. Chosen family replacing the blood family that chose lies over truth. My phone rang at 8:30. Kendrick's name on the screen. Sorry to interrupt your evening, he said, but I got a call from Gregory Marsh an hour ago. Settlement offer. I put the phone on speaker so Tindra could hear. What kind of settlement? Your mother drops the competency lawsuit entirely. House sells immediately. She's already got a buyer lined up. 60-40 split based on ownership percentages. She gets $171,000. You get $114,000. She keeps all contents and furnishings. Clean break. Settlement offer. She wants to sell. What's the catch? I asked. You have to agree within 24 hours. Sale closes within 30 days. You sign a mutual release. No future claims. No admissions of wrongdoing from either party. The family home is gone, but you walk away with your full 40% value in cash. Tindra and I looked at each other across the pizza box. And if I don't take it, I asked. We go to trial February 15. If we win, You keep the 40% ownership, and she can't force a sale without your consent. If we lose, if the judge sides with her incompetency claim, you get nothing, and she invalidates the entire 2018 transfer. So, guaranteed $114,000, or risk losing everything for the chance to keep partial ownership of a house I can't live in anyway. That's the choice, Kendrick said quietly. I can't tell you what to do, but you have 24 hours to decide. I need your answer by tomorrow night. After he hung up, Tindra and I sat in silence. What are you going to do? She asked finally. I looked around my small apartment, the space I'd built with my own money, the independence nobody could take away. I don't know, I said, but I need to talk to Dad first. I was folding laundry in my apartment when Kendrick called at 10 o'clock on the morning of January 22. I'd rejected the settlement offer 2 days ago, choosing the risk of trial over guaranteed money. Now I was waiting to see if that decision would cost me everything. It's over, Kendrick said without preamble. The judge denied her appeal. I sat down on my apartment floor, clean scrubs still in my hands. What appeal? After you rejected the settlement, your mother proceeded with the competency lawsuit. Circuit Court judge reviewed all the evidence. Your father's 2018 medical records showing full cognitive capacity, the irrevocable deed language, 5 years of your property tax payments, writer's fraud attempt at the county clerk. Judge dismissed her claims entirely yesterday afternoon. She filed for reconsideration last night, denied this morning for lack of legal standing. So it's really over? My voice sounded strange. No more courts, no more depositions, no more threats. It's over. Your 40% ownership is permanent legal fact. Judge ruled your father had full legal capacity in 2018. The transfer was legally valid, and your mother has no standing to challenge it. I sat on my apartment floor, phone in hand, realizing I didn't have to fight anymore. There's more, Kendrick continued. The judge's ruling included a finding that your mother's deliberate concealment of the deed since 2020, combined with Ryder's attempt to file fraudulent corrections, constituted bad faith sufficient to support criminal fraud charges. Only your father's current incapacity prevents the county from pursuing prosecution. Criminal charges. If your father could give testimony, the DA could charge them both. But given his stroke limitations and the civil matter being resolved, they're declining to prosecute. The finding goes on permanent record anyway. My mother and brother had come within a legal technicality of criminal fraud charges. The truth was now documented in official court records where no family gossip or Facebook post could erase it. What happens now? I asked. The house will be sold. Your mother agreed to listing at $285,000 with the 60-40 split enforced by court order. Sale should close in 30 to 45 days. You'll receive $114,000 from your share after closing costs. And Mom, she has 60 days from sale closing to vacate. Your father will need to be moved to a permanent care facility. That decision is hers as his medical proxy. The family home would be sold. My parents' 37-year marriage reduced to a real estate transaction and 2 separate futures. My father would spend his final years in a facility. My mother would move somewhere alone with her share of the money and the reputation she'd destroyed fighting for it. Can you come to the office this afternoon? Kendrick asked. I have paperwork for you to sign. I drove to his office at 2 o'clock. The January sun was bright and cold, the kind of day that makes everything look clear and honest. Kendrick's office looked different today. Sunlight through the window felt warm instead of interrogative. The legal documents spread across his desk felt like closure instead of weapons. You were smart to reject that settlement, he said, sliding papers across for my signature. This ruling means You weren't just right about the deed. You were right about everything. Your father's capacity, your mother's fraud, the irrevocable protection. It's all validated in court record now. I signed the house sale authorization, my signature looking steadier than it had in weeks. What happens to Mom now? I asked. Does she have to leave the house immediately? She has 60 days from closing. That gives her time to find a place and arrange movers. Your father's care transition will take coordination. She'll need to work with Sumner Regional to find appropriate long-term placement. Will I have any say in where he goes? Not unless she gives you medical proxy, which seems unlikely. But you can visit him anywhere he's placed. She can't restrict that anymore. Kendrick pulled out a final document, an itemized invoice showing $8,200 in legal fees, research, filing costs, document preparation, court appearances, the hours he'd spent building the case that had just won in circuit court. I looked at my bank balance mentally. $7,200 in savings, minus this bill, would leave me negative $1,000. I'd need a payment plan. Kendrick took the invoice, stamped it with a red marker that said, "Paid in full," and filed it in a folder. What? Your father paid a retainer in 2018 when he filed the deed. Kendrick's voice was quiet. He came to my office, explained he was transferring property to his daughter, and said he anticipated his wife would challenge it. He paid me $8,500 to protect you if that happened. This invoice is covered by that retainer from 6 years ago. Paid in full, 6 years ago. My father had known in 2018 that my mother would fight. He'd prepared for the lawsuit, the fraud attempts, the family warfare. He'd protected me not just with the deed, but with the legal defense fund to enforce it. He knew, I whispered. He knew, Kendrick confirmed, and he made sure you'd be protected. I walked to my car in the bright, cold afternoon, carrying signed documents that meant the house would sell and the war was over. My phone buzzed as I unlocked the door. Unknown number, text message. This is Ryder. Can we talk? Not about the house, about Dad. The legal war was over, but the family damage remained, and my brother was reaching out. Tuesday, January 24. I walked into Sumner Regional Rehabilitation Center at 2 o'clock for my first scheduled visit with my father since the court ruling. Not an emergency, not a stolen moment, a planned visit on a regular schedule. I'd texted Ryder back, not ready to talk yet, but I'm visiting Dad, Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. if you want to see him. My father was in his wheelchair by the window, physical therapy finished. His face lit up when he saw me. Hey, Dad. I set down the coffee I'd brought, decaf with cream. I got the apartment set up, 1 bedroom, $675 a month in Crossville. I still have most of my emergency fund left. He took the coffee with his working hand. Proud. You did it. The court ruled in our favor. The deed you gave me is permanent legal fact now. Mom can't challenge it anymore. 2 taps on my hand. Relief. The house will sell in March. You'll need long-term care placement. Mom's handling arrangements as your medical proxy, but I'll visit wherever you go. He squeezed my hand. We sat in comfortable silence, him sipping coffee, me reading him news, local stories, Tennessee weather, the mundane details of a world still turning. Thursday afternoon, I returned at 2 o'clock. I was reading aloud when someone knocked on the doorframe. Ryder stood there, looking thinner and uncertain. Can I come in? I'm not here to fight. Just wanted to see him and apologize to you. I looked at my father. He nodded. Come in, I said. Ryder sat on the other side of the bed. I'm sorry for the fraud attempt, for believing Mom without asking your side, for all of it. Ryder's apology was clumsy and incomplete, but it was real. The first crack in the family wall I didn't have to force open myself. Mom cut me off after the county clerk thing became public record, he continued quietly. Said if I couldn't help the family, I wasn't part of it. I'm working county appraiser full-time now, no safety net. Learning what you already knew about standing on your own. I'm sorry she did that, I said, and I meant it. We sat together for an hour, the three of us, not fixing everything, but starting something that might eventually resemble forgiveness. January 28, I arrived for my Tuesday visit and checked in at the nurse's station. Sharon Duvall, the rehabilitation nurse in her 40s, who quietly coordinated family visiting schedules to prevent conflicts between feuding relatives, smiled when she saw me. Your father had a good morning, she said. That's great. I signed the visitor log. Has he been getting regular visitors? Your mother comes Mondays and Wednesdays, 10 a.m. Your Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 p.m. Your brother's been Friday afternoons. Sharon's tone was neutral. Works out well. He gets visitors spread through the week. Does she know I'm coming these days? She knows. She asked what days you visit. I think she wants to avoid complications. This way he gets both of you, and nobody fights in front of him. Unspoken arrangement. Permanent boundaries. Neither of us reconciling, but both caring for the man who'd tried to protect us in different ways. That works, I said. The rehab center smelled like institutional coffee and disinfectant. My father's room had photos I'd brought, my nursing graduation, the two of us at my high school ceremony, evidence I was always his daughter. I sat with him for 90 minutes, helping with hand exercises, reading the Lebanon Democrat, telling him about ICU shifts and the apartment becoming home. Walking to my car at 3:30, I saw my mother's vehicle pulling into the lot. Wrong time, wrong day, schedule confusion, or deliberate attempt to see me, I'd never know. We made eye contact through windshields. Two women who'd fought a legal war over property and principle, who'd weaponized family and deployed fraud, who'd become permanent enemies. Neither of us waved. She sat in her car for a long moment, then put it in reverse and drove away, choosing avoidance over confrontation, keeping the boundaries that let both of us care for my father without destroying each other further. Some families heal, some just learn to stop bleeding. I drove to my apartment in Crossville. The house would sell in March. I'd deposit $114,000 and keep working ICU shifts because nursing was who I was, not just what I did. My mother would have her separate life. Ryder would rebuild his, and I had already built mine. The fighting was over. The life I'd built was mine. I had my father's protection, my own independence, and the hard-won knowledge that family isn't just who you're born to. It's who shows up when you need them, who tells you the truth even when it's costly, who fights for you when you can't fight for yourself. My father had done that in 2018 with a deed and a legal retainer. I'd done it for myself by refusing to back down. That was enough. Friday evening in late January, I stood in my apartment kitchen cooking pasta while Tindra set the table. The ordinary rhythm felt precious. Garlic sizzling in olive oil, water boiling, her voice telling me about a difficult customer at work, simple and mine. You seeing Dad this weekend? Tindra asked, opening the wine she'd brought. Tuesday. I don't do weekends anymore. Those are Mom's. Works better this way. It's weird, but it's working. She poured 2 glasses. You're both taking care of him without tearing each other apart. That's something. I drained the pasta and tossed it with marinara sauce I'd made last Sunday. Meal prep, grocery budgets, Tuesday night cooking sessions, the architecture of an independent life built one small choice at a time. We ate at my second-hand table, talking about mundane things, work schedules, weekend plans, whether to try the new coffee shop in Crossville. The kind of normal I couldn't have imagined 38 days ago when I stood locked on that porch with trash bags and no plan. The apartment smelled like garlic and marinara, sounded like Tindra's laughter, domestic and safe in a way the family house never was. After Tindra left, I cleaned the kitchen and found myself looking at the county clerk's stamped ownership document on my desk. Next to it, my nursing license, father's 2018 note, and an old photo that had fallen from my purse yesterday. Christmas 2017, 4 months before my father filed the deed. We were all there, Dad and I on one side, Mom's arm around Ryder on the other, everyone smiling at the camera. But looking at it now, I saw what I'd missed then, my father's expression. Not just happy, but watchful, protective. He was already seeing the fault lines, already planning to give me a way out. He'd known in 2017 what would happen. By March 2018, he'd filed the deed and paid Kendrick's retainer. He'd protected me before I knew I needed protection. I sat on my couch, tracing the journey in my mind. December 22, I'd stood on that porch with $8,500, nowhere to go, and a family that chose lies over asking me questions. Today I had an apartment, a job I was good at, and people who chose me back. The deed wasn't just property transfer. It was my father saying, "You're worth defending. You deserve protection, not just expectation. You matter beyond what you can provide to this family." I picked up his 2018 note, reading words I'd memorized. "If you're reading this, Colleen tried to take what I gave you. Don't let her. I didn't give me the deed because I deserved the money. He gave it to me because I deserved protection." The document wasn't inheritance. It was proof I was worth defending. My mother had found that deed in 2020 and hidden it for 3 years, waiting for my father to die so she could erase it. She'd looked at written proof of his choice and decided her wants mattered more than his intentions. She'd locked me out of the house, turned the family against me, committed fraud, and fought me in court, all to take back what she believed she deserved. When did I stop feeling like a daughter and start feeling like a survivor? Somewhere between the county clerk's office and the circuit court ruling. Somewhere between Kendrick's conference room at midnight and my father's rehab room on Tuesday afternoons. Somewhere between the motel that smelled like desperation and this apartment that smelled like the pasta I'd cooked myself. I walked to my bedroom and looked around. Modest furniture, clean sheets, clothes I'd bought with my own paychecks, books on the nightstand, scrubs hanging in the closet for Monday's shift. My mother thought family meant ownership. Dad knew it meant protection. He gave me the deed so I'd always have a way out. I'd spent years thinking good daughters don't set boundaries, that saying no meant you didn't love enough, that protecting yourself was selfish. Now I knew boundaries are how you prove your worth more than what people want to take from you. The house would sell in March. I'd take my 40% and keep working ICU shifts because I liked who I was when I saved lives. That was the real inheritance, not the money, but knowing I'd built this life with my own choices and my father's belief that I deserved the chance to build it. My phone chimed. Email from the realtor. Offer received for $287,000, $2,000 over asking. Sale proceeds in 30 days. My 40% would be $114,800. I read the email twice, then set my phone down without replying immediately. The money would come when it came. I'd already won what mattered. I stood in my living room, looking at the space I'd created, small and imperfect and entirely mine. No one could change these locks. No one could tell me I didn't belong here. No one could take this away because I'd built it myself with emergency fund savings, careful budgets, and the knowledge that I was worth protecting. Some keys unlock doors. Some unlock the understanding that you were never meant to fit in spaces too small for who you became. I turned off the lights and locked my door from the inside. My lock, my key, my life. 38 days ago, my mother locked me out of a house I'd lived in for 33 years. Tonight, I locked myself in to something better. A space where love meant protection, family meant choice, and home meant I built it with my own hands. The war was over. The life was mine. For years, I thought good daughters never said no. I believed that protecting yourself meant you didn't love your family enough. Don't make my mistake of waiting until you're locked out with your life in trash bags to realize that some people will take everything you give and still demand more. I wish I'd set boundaries sooner before it became a war. What I learned wasn't just about property or money. It was about knowing your worth before others try to price it. My father gave me that deed because he saw what I couldn't, that protection matters more than peace. Some families love through control, others love through freedom. People might call this a revenge story, but it's not about revenge. It's about justice. This revenge story taught me that defending yourself isn't selfish. I believe God put me through this to show me that you can't pour from an empty cup, and setting boundaries doesn't make you cruel, it makes you whole. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between peace and protection? Please share this video with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories about standing up for yourself, subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything to this community we're building together. Thank you for staying until the very end. I truly appreciate you being here. One final note, while this story is based on real experiences, some details have been fictionalized for privacy and storytelling purposes. The message about boundaries